Okay, I've just started the recording. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julie Ellison. I'm the Associate Director for the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Thanks for the support of the Dean's Office during the interesting time we now find ourselves in. And before I introduce the speaker today, I want to let you know the next MENAS Colloquium talk will take place on Friday, October 10th at 3 p.m. via Zoom. The speaker will be Professor Perendosa, Professor Emerita of the Department of Sociology at Simon Fraser University. Her talk will be Securing Food in Zones of Protracted Violence in relation to Afghanistan. In addition to our normal co-sponsorships, the Center for Regional Food Studies, directed by Professor Megan Carney, has kindly agreed to co-sponsor the event. Today, it's my true pleasure to introduce Professor Idil Oztig, who took a research sabbatical with MENAS in spring 2025, where we made her acquaintance. She was visiting from her home institution of Yıldız Technical University in Istanbul. Professor Oztig received an MA in European politics from the University of Siena in Italy in 2005. She finished her PhD in 2013 at Tübingen University on Why Do Border Guards Shoot, an analysis of shoot to kill policies which target illegal border crossers. She has served as the editor-in-chief since 2016 for Alternatives Global, Local, and Political. She has a joint book publication with AC Colloq on China's high-tech regression against Uyghurs, novel theoretical insights about and published by Palgrave Macmillan. Another recent publication is The Enemy of My Enemy is My Friend, Chinese Leaders' Foreign Visits and Transnational Repression of Uyghurs in Conflict Management and Peace Science this year. Dr. Oztig has published regularly in a variety of journals, including Journal of Political Science Education, Israel Affairs, and Contemporary Affairs. Without further ado, it is my true pleasure to welcome Professor Oztig to speak on ISIS and Dabiq. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and it's a real privilege for me to give us a presentation as part of the MENAS Colloquium series. And as Julie mentioned, I spent the last semester at the University of Arizona, and my time there was really productive. And I would like to thank Benjamin Fortna and Mahmoud Aziz for their hospitality and support. And I would like to extend my thanks to Julie and Olivia. I felt really welcomed at the University of Arizona. And today I'm going to share with you the research I conducted while I was at the University of Arizona. I will explain the ISIS Caliphate from a political branding perspective. More specifically, I will explain how ISIS instrumentalized the caliphal concept and institution in order to create a political brand for itself. I will first give an overview of ISIS. What is ISIS? The origins of ISIS date back to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. The group was founded by Zarqawi in 2004, but after Zarqawi was killed by US airstrikes, Omar al-Baghdadi took over the group, and the group's name was changed to the Islamic State of Iraq. And after Omar al-Baghdadi was killed, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, as you see in the right picture, took over the group. The Syrian civil war facilitated the group's transnational expansion, and the group's name was changed again to the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham in 2013. And as the group expanded its operations in Syria, it engaged in a power struggle with Al-Qaeda, and eventually it split from Al-Qaeda. What are the differences between Al-Qaeda and ISIS? There are major differences. For example, Al-Qaeda adopts a far enemy strategy. It consistently targets the US, whereas for ISIS, the ISIS adopts a near enemy strategy. So ISIS consistently attacked governments in Iraq and Syria. It also attacked minorities such as Yazidis, Kurds, and Shiites. And Al Qaeda and ISIS have different strategies. For Al Qaeda, the revival of the Caliphate was a vague long term strategy, whereas for ISIS, it was immediate. And with its Hollywood style production capabilities, ISIS is much more advanced than Al Qaeda. So after ISIS split from Al Qaeda, it declared a caliphate in Mosul in 2014, and it sent shockwaves around the world. And after ISIS established the caliphate, it increased its territorial expansion. It turned Raqqa, a Syrian city, into its de facto capital, and it functioned as a quasi-state in both Iraq and Syria. It established a government. It even had ministries for oil, fisheries, health, and etc. It established local governments, courts, schools, and social services. At the peak of its power, it imposed control over 10 million people, and it controlled territory roughly the size of Britain. And it generated revenue through oil trafficking. It looted museums and it sold antiquities outside and imposed taxes on local populace. So it functioned as a state. And it was very successful in recruiting foreign fighters. By 2016, more than 30,000 people from 86 countries to travel to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS. But ISIS was eventually defeated. It was defeated by US airstrikes in 2019. But after that, ISIS was not completely abolished. It regressed to guerrilla warfare. So there are still some ISIS fighters who operate in the deserts of Syria and Iraq, but they are not as organized as before. But ISIS continues to leverage social media. It actively uses X, Telegram, Rocket Chat, and YouTube to attract followers. And there are ISIS affiliates around the world. Boko Haram in Nigeria and ISIS-K in Afghanistan, for example, pledged allegiance to the group. And now I will give an insight into why ISIS established a caliphate. I will first give a historical context of the colorful institution, then I will get into political branding. Well, the caliphal institution began following the death of Prophet Muhammad. After Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and Ali became the caliphs. So they're all referred to as the Rashidun Caliphate. After the Rashidun Caliphate, the Umayyads, the Abbasis, the Fatimids, the Mamluks, and the Ottomans claimed the caliphal title. But there are nuances in that. We cannot generalize because the Fatimids were Shia rulers, and the Mamluks did not claim the caliphal title themselves. They kept the caliphal institution, but they installed people of Abbasi origin as caliphs. So after the Ottoman Empire collapsed following World War I, modern Turkey was created. The founder of modern Turkey, Atatürk, did not immediately abolish the caliphate. Instead, Abdülmecit II was selected by the Grand National Assembly as the caliph. He was of Ottoman lineage and he was a very well-read and intellectual person. He was also a painter. And his caliphal authority was very symbolic, and he lacked real political power, and he ruled for 2 years. In 1924, the caliphal institution was abolished, and he was sent into exile. The abolition of the caliphate sent shockwaves around the world. Some scholars from Al-Azhar University found this decision illegal and called on Muslims around the world to protest. A series of conferences was held in Mecca, Jerusalem, and scholars debated on whether to revive the caliphate or not. And Indian Muslims really resented this decision because they viewed the caliphal institution in terms of their anti-colonial struggle. So, but from 1924 until 2014, there was no serious attempt to revive the caliphate. I mean, as I mentioned, Al Qaeda mentioned the revival of the caliphate, but it was not a pivotal dynamic for the group. And Hizb ut-Tahrir, it operates in more than 50 countries and it advocates for the revival of the caliphate, but it has not taken an action in order to do so. So ISIS really made an audacious attempt in reviving the caliphate. And what was the strategic reason behind the ISIS's establishment of the caliphate? And I will use a political branding perspective in order to explain why and how ISIS instrumentalized the caliphal concept and institution. Well, political branding is a subset of political marketing. Political marketing refers to the application of marketing strategies in politics. Basically, in politics, politicians need to understand and appeal to the aspirations, needs, and fears of their potential voters. And this strategy is valid for terrorist organizations as well. And political branding is a very important tool of political marketing. And branding process involves creating emotional and psychological bonds with audience. So successful political brands communicate with their target audience. They demonstrate a unique identity, and as such, they distinguish political leaders and organizations from their rivals. And they give a sense of belonging and cultivate loyalty within the target audience. So when a group establishes a successful political brand, its followers also feel empowered. So it's a kind of emotional and psychological dynamic. Political branding techniques of ISIS has been discussed in the literature. For example, Simons shows how ISIS employed political branding to convert its intangible assets such as reputation, recognition, fear, loyalty to tangible realities on the ground, that is, military success. Another scholar analyzed how ISIS branded death through Islamic prophecies and the spectacle of terror. Another scholars analyzed how ISIS branding is enmeshed with adventure and victory. And I give a new insight into this body of literature by deconstructing the colorful narratives in The Book, ISIS's flagship magazine, and explaining it through the prism of political branding. Well, my main area of analysis is The Book. The Book served as ISIS's official transnational media outlet from 2014 to 2016. So there are overall 15 issues of The Book. It was published in English and various other languages, and it consists of articles, interviews, and violent images. I gained access to the book through jihadology.net. So why did I choose the book? ISIS had other publications such as El Naba, the Islamic State Report, and the Islamic State News. They were either in Arabic or consisted of small newsletters. After the book, ISIS published another magazine called Rumiyah, but it mostly consisted of practical instruction on how to launch lone wolf attacks or how to create bombs, etc. So the book offers the perfect laboratory for analyzing the caliphal narratives of ISIS. Right now, you see the cover titles of the book magazine. The first issue is titled The Return of the Khilafah. Most colorful narratives are in this issue. The second issue is titled The Flood, which refers to the Great Flood. And the third issue is titled A Call to Hijrah. So here ISIS evokes the historical Hijrah, which is the migration of Prophet Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina in order to create a political community. So by referring to that historical concept, ISIS kind of calls on Muslims to join ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And the fourth issue is titled The Faith Crusade. And the term crusade and the crusader are consistently used in the book. So most Western leaders are labeled as crusaders. So it's one of the most important binary discourse of ISIS, which I will get into. So what are the common themes in the book? First of all, in the book, there is an apocalyptical narrative. So the book architects argue that there is a cosmic war between Muslims and non-Muslims, and this war is inevitable. And since ISIS is established, and since ISIS created a caliphate, Muslims will definitely win this war. So this worldview is very deterministic. And the book builds on a very simplistic view. The West is depicted as an enemy. So the differences between Western states and Western people are ignored. And the West and Western people are labeled as crusaders. So it's very populist, very simplistic, very distorted view of history and current affairs. There's a strong storytelling element. There is a victim, hero, villain triad. So victims are Muslims. The hero is definitely ISIS, and the villain is all non-Muslims, whether the West, Western people, Western countries, or minorities. So the book architects make a strong effort to depict that there's a good life in the caliphate. So they make an effort to attract foreign fighters and other people to join ISIS and serve in that community. So by giving this message, they appeal to the most basic human needs, a sense of belonging, a sense of certainty. So they promise people that there's a good life in the caliphate, and that if they join ISIS, their life will be better. So there's a promise of change, there's a promise of certainty, and there's a promise of a sense of community. So the message is that if they go to Syria and Iraq, their life will be better and they will be taken care of. Every issue of ISIS begins with a quote attributed to Zarqawi. The spark has been lit here in Iraq, and its heat will continue to intensify by Allah's permission until it burns the Crusader armies in Dabiq. So here, Dabiq is also strategically chosen because Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said that in Dabiq there would be a war between Muslims and non-Muslims, and Muslims would win the war. So it's an important place in Islamic eschatology. So the first issue is titled The Return of Khilafah, and so the Khilafah is used interchangeably with the Caliphate. So it's written, soon by Allah's permission, a day will come when the Muslim will walk everywhere as a master, having honor, being revered, with his head raised high and his dignity preserved. Anyone who dares to offend him will be disciplined, and any hand that reaches out to harm him will be cut off. So let the world know that we are living today in a new era. So here, the message is that, ISIS is aware of the problems that Muslims face. And they kind of built on a very manipulative psychology. So they appeal to the grievances of Muslims. And they say, since now there is ISIS, since now there is the Caliphate, ISIS will provide a solution to all the problems of Muslims. And Muslims no longer need to feel small. They are now empowered, and all they need to do is to join ISIS. So it's a propagandistic worldview. So it's also in the first issue, there's a heading, a call to Hijra. As I said, it evokes the historical events. So it's written, the state is a state for all Muslims. The land is for the Muslims, all the Muslims. Muslims everywhere, whoever is capable of performing Hijra, immigration to the Islamic State, then let him do so, because Hijra to the land of Islam is obligatory. So since ISIS created the Caliphate, they instill a sense of obligation among Muslims that they must join ISIS. So this is a kind of religious duty to serve ISIS. And here you see that there's a call to all Muslims, especially doctors, engineers, scholars, and specialists. And ISIS deliberately adopts a binary worldview in the book. For instance, here it's written, O Ummah of Islam, indeed the world today has been divided into two camps and two trenches, with no third camp present, the camp of Islam and faith, and the camp of kufr and hypocrisy. So here, ISIS divides the world between ISIS and its radical ideology and everything else. So there is no room for a third view. There is no room for moderate views. And Muslims are given with no choice but to side with ISIS. So it's a radical manipulative ideology that speaks to the disillusioned Muslims. The 10th issue of the book is titled The Law of Allah or the Laws of Man. So here is written, if not for the absence of the Khilafah before, there would not have been a Sharia justification for those territorial leaderships or small groups to be formed and remain. Accordingly, it is obligatory to appoint a single Imam and Khalifa for the Ummah who will govern the people in accordance with Allah's religion and make them follow the laws of the Sharia. So ISIS makes a deliberate attempt to attribute legitimacy, political legitimacy for itself. But throughout the book, the magazine architects cherry pick the Quran and certain hadiths in order to create religious legitimacy for themselves. So they kind of argue that, the establishment of the caliphate is necessary not only for political matters, but from a religious perspective as well. And since the caliphate is established, now Muslims have a duty to join ISIS. So this argument is repeated in the 13th issue of the book, which is titled The Rafida from Ibn Saba to the Dajjal. The Khilafah is an extremely significant matter in Allah's law. It builds unity between the Muslims and prevents division. It also steers their affairs. Likewise, the solutions to all issues of the Ummah lie in the establishment of the Khilafah. So you could also see here that ISIS give a certainty. There is no room for questioning or deliberation. So the message is that now ISIS will solve all the problems of Muslims. So let's deconstruct the colorful narrative of the book. So throughout the book, ISIS not only positions itself against non-Muslims, but also Shia, Yazidi, Sufi, and moderate Muslim beliefs. So basically, ISIS appeals to Sunni Muslims. So, but we have to bear in mind that the Sunni Muslim world is divided along ethnic and sectarian lines. Ethnically, there are various groups like Turks, Malaysians, Saudi Arabians, Pakistanis, etc. And there are different denominations like Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, Shafi. And by establishing the caliphate, ISIS aspires to become a unifying force in this highly divided world. So it builds on the prestige of the previous caliphates. But again, we have to bear in mind that the caliphal institution emerged in the pre-modern times, and it was claimed by pre-modern dynasties. And the caliphal institution attempted to be created by ISIS cannot be evaluated as the continuation of the previous caliphate. It's a grotesque, manufactured version of the historical caliphate. And in the book, ISIS relies on a very simplified and distorted view of history. So the book architects make a strong effort to make an association between the ISIS caliphate and the powerful caliphates in the history, but there is no uniform caliphal authority in the past. The powers of the caliphate in the history varied intensely. For example, during the Abbasi rule, Muslims enjoyed the golden age of Islam. They made a lot of inventions. They engaged in philosophical deliberations. They discussed Aristotle, etc. So the caliphal authority of the Abbasi period was very powerful. We cannot compare the caliphal authority exercised by the Abbasis with that of the last caliph, which is Abdulmecid II. As I mentioned, his role was very symbolic and he did not have any real political power. And ISIS deliberately distorts realities in order to reach certain political objectives. For example, in the book, there is no mention of religious tolerance shown during the Abbasi and Ottoman periods. During the Abbasi period, Jews, Christians played very important roles in the Abbasi palaces. And during the Ottoman time, there was the millet system. The Jews, Greeks, and Armenians had their own schools, courts, etc. So overall, ISIS kind of distorts very important realities pertaining to the caliphate and cherry picks certain events, certain dynamics in order to create a kind of an image for itself. And it turns the caliphate, a very rich concept, into a political brand infused with radicalism, violence, and hatred. So overall, it treats the caliphate as a product and it turns it as an instrument in order to create a political brand for itself. And as I said, it associates itself with powerful caliphate. And for example, it consistently associates itself with the Umayyad period. During the Umayyad period, for the first time in history, Muslims issued coins. Before that, they used Sasani and Byzantine coins. So that Muslims issued coins was very important event that demonstrated sovereignty and power of Muslims. And by issuing coins, ISIS aspired to emulate the Umayyads. And let's look at the use of black in the organization's flag. And it refers to the Abbasi period because black was an official dress color in the Abbasi palaces. And what about the Ottomans? So ISIS double architects make a strong effort to dismiss the caliphal authority claimed by the Ottomans. So they argue that the Ottomans had no lineage to the Qurayshi tribe. As a side note, belonging to the Qurayshi tribe was discussed as a requirement among scholars to become, the caliphate, but there was no consensus on that. There is no written rule on that. But in the book, ISIS leaders make a strong effort in order to manipulate this discussion and claim that the Ottomans were not real caliphs. And what about Mamluks? Yes, Mamluks installed Abbasi people as caliphs, but they kept the caliphal institution for centuries, but in the book, in 15 issues, the Mamluk rule is mentioned only once. And there's no mention of the Fatimids. The Fatimids were Shia rulers and they claimed the caliphal title simultaneously with the Abbasi rulers. So yes, there was some rivalry there. But they claimed the caliphal title for more than 200 years, and ISIS makes no mention of the Fatimids in the book. So why did ISIS create a caliphate? I mean, terrorist groups have a wide range of instruments in order to attract political, in order to attract supporters and reach political objectives. So we have to think, as you know, in the question, we have to ask ourselves the question how a newly emerged terrorist organization stand out in a highly competitive market. So it's highly probable that ISIS leaders view the Muslim world as a political market in which different ideas and offerings compete. For example, if we look at the Sunni Muslim world, there are various transnational movements. There is the Muslim Brotherhood. It was established in the 1920s and it was empowered after the Arab Spring. And there's Hizb ut-Tahrir. It was established in the 1950s and it operates in more than 50 countries. These organizations are mainly non-violent, but there is also the radical jihadist world. There is the Taliban, TTP in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda, other groups in Pakistan, etc. So ISIS leaders knew that they would have to compete with these organizations and they need something original and unique to stand out in this highly competitive market. And how would a newly established terrorist organization gain a competitive advantage? So they were aware that they needed to change political marketing dynamics in their favor. So one way of doing is to convince Sunni Muslims that their organization is unique, original, and superior. So they outmaneuver other organizations, other radical organizations. So Muslims should pledge allegiance only to ISIS, not other organizations. And the very revival of the caliphate gave them the exact opportunity. It gave them an opportunity to create a global political brand with which Muslims would want to be associated. And the establishment of the caliphate gave a message that Islamist organizations not interested in reviving the caliphate do not actually work for the Muslim cause. They're not interested in advancing Muslims' interests. And Islamist organizations interested in reviving the caliphate have lacked the power and courage to do so. So ISIS both has the courage, capacity, and will, determination to create the caliphate and work for the Muslims. So here in the first issue of the book, it's written, ISIS no longer exists in small cells that can be neutralized by missiles or small groups of commandos. It is now a real, if nascent, and unrecognized state actor, more akin in organization and power to the Taliban of the late 1990s than Al-Qaeda. So we can see a firm competition with Al-Qaeda here. ISIS associates itself with Taliban, a state-like actor, because compared to Al-Qaeda, ISIS demonstrated state-like capacity. So it makes a strong effort to highlight the difference between ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and it kind of affiliates itself with the Taliban. And ISIS leaders probably knew that people are drawn to power, and one way of projecting power is to outmaneuver your opponents, underlying the weakness of your opponents. As you could see in the 13th issue of the book, it's written that the number of ISIS followers dwarfs the number of followers that Al-Qaeda ever had. ISIS has gained affiliates faster than Al-Qaeda ever did. So ISIS here projects power. It shows itself as a very powerful organization. And of course, people would want to be associated with a powerful organization, not a weak organization. By associating themselves with the powerful organizations, they would feel empowered too. So as I mentioned, ISIS also used a religious argument in order to strengthen its, in order to give a legitimacy for itself. It's written, the Caliphate is an extremely significant matter in Allah's law. It builds unity between the Muslims and prevents division. It also steers their affairs. Likewise, the solutions to all the issues of Ummah lie in the establishment of the Khilafah. So here again, there is a sense of certainty, a sense of community for all Muslims. So throughout the book, there are pictures of extreme violence. So what does ISIS leaders try to achieve by showing this violent imagery? Well, extreme violence serves a number of purposes. First, it serves to intimidate Western countries and their nationals. And second, it speaks to the grievances of Muslims. It's a way of taking revenge against, Western countries that inflict harm upon Muslim people. So it's a tool of power projection. So by showing the pictures of extreme violence, ISIS also wants to appeal to the most hardened, the most violent supporters. So it's a tool of recruitment as well. The pictures of extreme violence are contrasted with pictures of compassion shown in ISIS-controlled territories. So here the message is that, yes, ISIS is very brutal, is very violent, but it shows compassion to people who join ISIS ranks. So there's a good community there. ISIS takes care of its people, and if people from around the world join ISIS, they will have a chance to contribute to something greater. Again, in order to conclude, I say ISIS not only sells a story, but it sells a brand, a political brand with which people want to be associated. So in order to create this political brand, it manipulates the history. It empties the concept of the caliphate and turns it to something completely different. So it turns the archaic concept and institution into a global brand by associating it with violence and extremism. So if you're interested in this topic, you could read my article published in Cambridge Review of International Affairs. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.